Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be making some upgrades to the layout. A few months ago, I went ahead and added on this extension in hopes of pulling out both of these corners and overall opening up the industrial area, as well as adding on a secondary line, which I hope to run from here directly into the mountain layout, which until today has remained fairly inactive, and I want to incorporate it into the rest of the layout a little bit better. It's not going to be a main line because unfortunately some of the tunnel heights and some of the sharper corners don't go so well with double stack containers. Since there's already a piece of trackage running under here, my goal is to add on a switch so that trains can run off the main line over here through the mountain and then up to this section. And then once the trains reach this section, I want to add on a couple mainline switches so they can switch tracks directly onto here and then head right back out onto the main line, which is already all linked up over there. So I think it should be pretty straightforward. I'm also looking to move these switches forward a little bit just so that they're easier to reach, as well as get rid of some of this foam because I've never been a huge fan of this stuff. And these corners definitely need to get redone. They've just been hanging on by a thread. They have been getting the job done, but I mean, some sections are literally in dire straits. I'm going to start by removing these two corners. I think given how many times they've broke over the last few months, this really should not be too difficult. Well, that really didn't take a whole lot to take apart. Now what I want to do is just go through here with a vacuum and just try to tidy everything up a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, it's slightly precarious being on the layout because this part is a hardwood table, but over here is styrofoam with two studs holding it up, so I cannot step anywhere here. But anyways, I'm really happy to finally be ripping out this foam. I can't tell you just how bad this stuff is. I've had some suggest that this is better than cork roadbed, but I don't find it's very stable, and with heavier locomotives it actually wears out the rail joiners because, you know, the track heaves a little bit. And on top of that, the soundproofing abilities, which, you know, are supposedly better than with cork, are taken away once you add the ballast because it hardens it. So there's not really any advantages to this kind of stuff. I know that cork is kind of old school, but I think a better term for it might be tried and true. So away this stuff goes. Well, in terms of ripping stuff up, that covers most of it, with the exception of this section. So with that all tidied up, I think we'll start prepping the layout for the new track, but before we do, I just want to point out a pretty big problem which needs to be fixed on the layout, something which has been developing for many years now. So you can see it for this new section right here. If I put a ruler down, it's pretty darn level. There's not really too much of a discrepancy between this and the Homosote. But if you come over here, this section which I built 5 years ago with scrap wood, you can see there's a pretty big gap there. So when I built this, it actually was even with the Homosote, but either due to the humidity down here or lack thereof, this warped over the years and I had to keep shimming up the track with pieces of cardboard. It's really not an ideal situation, so what I want to do is try to even this out somehow. I think I'll add some foam here just so that this is a bit better before we go laying new track over it. I don't know, working with this layout it's kind of like an old mill, you know? There's just addition on top of addition, and sometimes you need to make some unusual repairs in order to get it to work right. I still like it though. I'll just clean this up a little bit and cut this custom piece of cork, so we'll see how it likes to party with that. You can see that we got a low point here and a low point here, which means this is a high point. So I reckon if we just go at this with a random orbital sander, should be able to get it all nice and plumb. Well, after the sanding and some other adjustments, I think that it's looking pretty darn good. So I also lifted up this board right here. You can see when you push this down, it's just about even. Because back when I built this, I actually had to lower this side to compensate for the warped wood. So I did some adjustments to the screws to bring this back up, which is important because, of course, the track's going to be coming over this piece now. So we'll do a bit more adjusting. But as for the cork, I think we can start to glue it down and actually start placing some of the track. And now comes the real exciting part, putting down some cork and putting down a bit of track, or at least laying it out. Well, it's slowly starting to come together. I did a little bit of work and got this line mostly complete. It still needs to be connected over there, but it's just going to kind of set the stage for how these two inside lines go. I also need to buy another switch and reconnect the freight yard, but that all needs to get redone anyway, so that's going to be a project for another day. So I think for now we'll continue kind of splicing this in and laying out the rest of the track. So at this point, the track work on this side of the layout is complete, and I'm very happy with how it's looking. I think it's a lot neater than the original setup, and it should be a lot more practical as well. Eventually, I want to obviously ballast and solder everything up, but I'm going to wait about a month to do that because I want to do a ton of testing, run different trains over here, because when you set something like this up, there are bound to be little problems, and when nothing's attached, it's pretty easy to fix those problems, but once you got everything soldered and ballasted, that becomes a bit of a nightmare. Ask me how I know. Anyways, moving on to connecting up the rest of the layout. I've already got this part of the line complete as I showed you earlier, so we're just going to link up the rest of it. And then over here, I went through my spare parts bin and found an old brass switch. It's not the best kind of track to be using, but most of this layout is made with brass. The whole layout cost like $50 at the time of construction, and this was primarily why. So we're just going to stick with that, so that's going to go in there. And you can see there's already another switch here. If you've been a viewer for the channel for a while, you might remember that there actually used to be a bridge back when this was a separate layout to link the two together. So this is just left over from that, and I was going to remove it, but I realized something, which is that if you look over here, there's actually an abandoned line back from when the yard was connected this way. So I'm thinking, instead of it coming through this tunnel, kind of run it around this beam right here, connect it up to the switch, which is already intact, and then that will make an express route to get trains into the yard a little bit quicker, or at least small locomotives. So anyways, let's begin on that. Another thing I should point out about this old brass track is that a lot of it actually dates back to my father's original layout, and the story behind that is when we found his collection of locomotives and rolling stock, we had just assumed that all the buildings and track had been thrown away. And about 5 years later, we were clearing out bins in my grandmother's house, just kind of throwing stuff out, and we found it all. So that's part of the reason I was able to build this layout so cheap. And, again, it's not the greatest track, but it's kind of cool that track from 40 years ago is still serving the layout to this very day. So this part of the switch was not having it. Luckily I managed to find an identical unit, so we'll just install that instead. So now we'll go ahead and add some track right here and actually connect the two. There is going to be a bit of a slope because this layout, as you can see, does not use road bed, and this might turn out to be a problem because having a hill like this can cause couplers to detach and things like that. It's not ideal. The problem is that I can't actually add road bed to this layout because some of these tunnel portals are too low already, and there's hardly any room to negotiate there because there's a track right on top. So maybe if these were removed it would fit, but I think for now I'm just going to build it this way and see how that works out. It's not perfect, but I think it's going to get the job done for now. I think the next step is going to be trying to connect this line down to the rail yard, which involves actually going around that beam right there. I have no idea how this is going to work or if it's even possible, but it's certainly going to be one for the books if I can manage to negotiate the track around all of this. And now I've got this nice cursed piece of track, which I'm just going to try to negotiate over to the yard. So with all the track work in the mountain complete, I think we'll move on to installing the two switches over here. There actually already are a couple switches inside this mountain, but they're a little bit too narrow for some of the trains I want to run through here, even though it is 18 radius in the back. And since they're inside the mountain, they're kind of difficult to access. I mean, they're not super far in, so I have been using them, but I think having a better set will make operations a little bit better, and then I'll decide what I want to do with the current switches at some point up the road. So let's get to installing those. Okay, finally got those two switches installed. That was a little bit more of a nightmare than I was expecting. I don't know if there was some old solder on the rails or what the case was, but trying to get those rear joiners into place was pretty challenging. But either way, the switches are installed now, which means the track work is technically complete. Well, complete as far as being together. In terms of operations, that might be a whole other story, but there's only one way to figure it out. So let's put together a train and actually try running some stuff on here. I'm pretty excited to see how it turns out. Alright, moment of truth here. Whoops. Okay, so already one problem, but that's to be expected on the first run. Okay, well, that doesn't seem so bad. It made it through. Let's try it again here. Okay, not too shabby. So I think now that this section has proven itself to be decent so far, I think what I want to do is stop the train up here, we'll uncouple it, hook up the intermodal cars, get those off the main line, pick up these cars again, and then try actually running them through the mountain layout, and that's going to be the real test. Alright, I went and got this thing all set up with the wireless throttle, which is really what I should have done from the beginning, but we'll be able to follow this thing and stop the train if needed here. Well, no problems with the first section. This is where things are going to get really interesting. The DCC doesn't really like the dodgier track work, but so far it's pulling through. Now, will it make it through the switches? Oh, it's struggling. It worked. Just gotta stop it because I didn't line the switch over there. Gonna send this thing through for a second pass just to make sure it wasn't beginner's luck. So far, so good. Nice. Oh. Okay, I think we might have lost the car. No, it re-railed itself. Okay then, well, I guess I'll call that a success. Just went and disconnected this thing from its train because I want to test out the shortcut that I made. I really don't know how that's going to go, but it should be kind of fun just to test it out. Well, moment of truth. Uh-oh. It looks like it's pinned itself against the beam. That's no good. Let's try it out with something with slightly less wheelbase. I'm gonna have to run this thing at like wide open throttle so it doesn't stall. Oh yeah, okay. So the electricals are not perfect on this track, but it hasn't been cleaned in a while, but it made it through the tunnel, so I guess I'll call that a success. Let's see if it'll go back here. Oh. And it's stalled out on the same switch. So clearly this section of track is going to need some troubleshooting. No surprises there. But a locomotive did technically make it there and back, so I'll call that a partial success. Maybe with a little more effort, this could actually be a practical piece of track. It was just, you know, kind of a fun afterthought to add this thing, so I'm glad we at least got something out of it. And now for some final testing, I've got the BNSF freighter on the inner circuit just to make sure everything there is in order, as well as a via rail locomotive with my LRC coaches, and those are pretty sensitive, so they'll pick up on any bad pieces of track real quickly. And the good news here is that hopefully with the added space between the two circuits, the cars will not make contact with each other anymore. That was a problem I was having with the previous curves, not just on this side, but also on the other side of the layout. So you might notice that over here, I've redone this outer curve because I didn't have much room when I built this to bring it further in, but there was some space on the edge of the layout to push this further out, and I also redid it, just made it a bit more even. And as you can see, it seems to be working just fine, so I think we'll call that a success there. Well, folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I certainly had a lot of fun setting all of this up today, and I'm very happy with the results. You know, these are all things I've wanted to add onto this layout for a very long time, so to see them actually created to some extent and working is extremely satisfying. And I know this is just the beginning, you know, I still have to add scenery and, you know, iron out any bugs this might have. But still, it's a major step forward. We've got an entirely new line and corners which hopefully won't cause as many problems. And eventually, I want to hook the yard back up, which I think is going to be another big project. But it's going to make this layout even better than it currently is. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much for watching. What do you think, Foreman Nerf Cat? Is the layout up to code?